it was totally different to how it feels with Dragonforce. So it's like you're putting yourself out there. There's nowhere to hide.
Right.
People say it's good or it's shit, and then you're done. So yeah, it was scary.
Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Belgian Jasper. If this is your first time in the channel, hit subscribe right now.
Beneath the darkness of infinity, the minds of man kneel before its cosmic.
Well, Marc, thank you so much for your time today. I genuinely appreciate it. I appreciate how busy and hectic your career always is. So I appreciate you taking the time. And we are here to talk about, not about the million things we can talk about, Dragonforce or what have you. Here to talk about your solo album, which is the soundtrack of an anime epic story still to be written. Is that a way to interpret it?
Yeah, that's quite a good way of interpreting it. Yeah, it's power metal inspired by anime and video game music, I'd say.
Yeah. It is interesting that, a lot of this, video games and TV shows coming from Japan, from the 80s to today, a lot of that music was inspired by Western hard rock and heavy metal. And now we see this whole scene because of the success in the Western world of Attack on Titan, Final Fantasy, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z when I was growing up. All of a sudden you have all these bands that are inspired by that again. It's like a circle that's going around. We see in North America as well, bands like Power Glove and Lords of the Trident and Unleash the Archers to some extent. Is that funny to see how there's this never-ending loop of inspiration?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because it's like originally it was the Japanese interpretation of Western stuff, and now they've done so many unique things with it, and I think included so many of their sort of cultural background into it that now, I'm listening to that and I find it more interesting than what they were copying, which is kind of odd. But, But no, 100%.
A thing that seems to be, really important to those bands that are really embracing that, and it's really becoming a scene here in North America. I'd love to get your perspective on how that's going in Europe, but the key thing about it seems to be that just being yourself and being super inclusive to anyone without being very preachy about it. That seems to be the core value. Is that something you see in Europe more and more as well?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say people have ever been particularly preachy in this genre of music anyway. But I think it's one of the most accepting genres that there is, really. I mean, it's even reflected in the fans. Like most metalheads you meet are often open-minded individuals, and they're not, apart from a few people they're like, that's not metal. There's always a few of those, but they'll die out eventually.
You get to play all over the world, and you guys are so busy, but given with the people that you do collaborate with, do you keep tabs on what's going around in regional scenes? Do you have time for that?
I think that probably the rest of Dragonforce do, especially Herman and Sam. For me personally, I actually don't bother. I'm still interested in the music, but I I'm not the sort of person that really follows what everyone's doing and finding out what's popular at the moment, because I just feel like I'm a bit past caring about that now. I still listen to the old music I like, so if something new crops up that's really good, I'll check it out, but I don't have my finger on the button like they do.
Now before we talk about the old music that you like, which I want to follow up on, you mentioned the crazy duo that Dragonforce obviously has in its ranks, with your guitar tandem. What's it like for you as a frontman, with a band that is equally famous for the two guitar players? Is that a blessing or a curse? Because they're kind of like lightning rods at time, but you're also a frontman, so you also want to be front and center. Let's be honest. What is that like?
Yeah, I think for me it's a blessing, but for another person it could be a curse, because I don't really care to be front of stage all the time. I'm not I don't really have much of an ego myself. I'm more than happy to let them shred, and being that way inclined, basically every time there's a guitar solo, I get time to go and walk away and just chill out for a second. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like I'm well aware that a lot of people coming to see Dragonforce, like they like the melodies of the songs, but they really want to see Herman and Sam play something. So to me, like, yeah, I'm quite happy to just be like the vessel through which they can play stuff, and when I'm not needed, just get off the stage.
Gazing down the endless roads, enchanting me like a siren song. The streets are
Now, because you mentioned it, like, you know, I kind of like the music that I always liked, and like old bands. People that know you well, and you've got many fans, will know this. People that don't know you as well might be surprised that when you're talking about that, you're not necessarily talking about the Maidens and the Priests, but more talking about the Yeses and the Greenslades, and, you know, old school English prog rock that provided like some real escapism. Their music was a bigger influence on your solo music than people might realize on the surface.
Actually, I wouldn't say so for this album. It's more like music that I like to enjoy but don't try to copy. So the whole progressive thing is actually something I wouldn't mind exploring a bit more later on, you know, with future stuff. But no, that's the music that I listen to get away from all the metal stuff, because I think like 70s progressive rock and metal is just like, yeah, such a huge escape, and it's so experimental and kind of strange in places that it's almost relaxing to listen to sometimes, and then suddenly chaotic and then relaxing again. So yeah, that's kind of what I listen to. But in terms of the older stuff in the genre that I like, it's, you know, like bands like Stratovarius, you know, Halloween, Ed Guy, those kind of stuff. But I'm not really so much into like the modern power metal scene.
To touch on the prog rock past as well, what those bands, well, not always, but often also had, was you could also just look at those albums and get lost in the journey of the artwork. You know, Roger Dean, his art I know has been big. We maybe not so much as like an exact copy of style or what have you, because obviously we see that anime influence as well, but imagery and artwork for you in general, but in this album as well, clearly is also important. You wanted to have a big cover where you could like find details, and if you look at it 25 times over, is that a right assumption? Yeah,
definitely. And I even went as far as to do like an individual piece of art for every single song. So when you open up the actual album sleeve, with the special edition, unfortunately not on all the editions, there's like, you know, some artwork to look at that's what I was picturing when thinking of the lyrical content and some of the melodies and stuff. So I really wanted it to be that old school experience of like the 70s prog bands did, where they're like the artwork is, you know, surreal, just like the music was, that it's really reflected in the artwork. Now on that artwork is also obviously the beautiful logo, clearly inspired by certain things as well. But for you, you know, you're not new to this game. You've got a lot of experience by now. Not to call you a legacy act just yet, or what have you, but how scary is it still to put something out under your own name, where you are, you know, obviously so attached to the art? Like, there's nowhere to hide. Like in Dragonforce, you could still hide behind the Dragonforce name, but now it's, hey, this is it. This is me. This is your name on it. Was this weird? Yeah, it was. That's actually a really good question, because that's something I've been thinking about recently. But it is a totally different feeling when the responsibility is all on your shoulders. But is this thing good? So, I mean, that's why I put so much effort into it, because as the deadline was drawing closer, I was like, oh shit, I'm going to make sure everything's absolutely perfect. Which, you know, like ultimately resulted in a better product. So that was a good thing, to feel that extra pressure. But like just before release date, it was totally different to how it feels with Dragonforce. So it's like you're putting yourself out there. There's nowhere to hide. People say it's good or it's shit, and then you're done. So it was scary.
see the twilight edge.
but then ultimately more rewarding when
Right.
the good came through, because it was all sort of directed at me and the keyboard player.
Right. Yes, for sure. Yeah, because you're not. I mean, this is labeled as a solo record would be, but behind the scenes, there's obviously people helping you, Chaz as well. It's not purely, but the thing has to have a name, obviously.
Exactly.
And I assume that also after the album was out, very different experience, because in your if your previous releases of Dragonforce, when an album comes out, that probably means you're already halfway through a crazy touring schedule, and you're playing all this music. Unfortunately, a lot of times when an established person puts out a solo record, while that person is also still engaged with an active band, that music tends to live and die with a record. Sometimes only one record, doesn't always get a chance to be promoted. Everybody watching this, I'm sure, knows what's on the horizon tour-wise with Dragonforce and so on. What are your hopes and dreams here?
Well, I mean, to be honest, just talking about my album and what I wanted it to do, it was mainly that I just wanted to release something for people to listen to. Simple as that. No crazy expectations. But I do think that doing being on tour with Dragonforce and having a new Dragonforce album coming out, that's all probably going to point people towards my album as well, which is only going to benefit the project. But yeah, it was mainly just a bit of a labor of love, really. Like, just here's a project I want to release into the world. And now that I'm getting more and more feedback, it's inspiring me to do a lot more than that, because you don't really know until it's out there what people are going to think and what effect it's going to have on people. And since the release, I'm now thinking this is actually really cool. People are really digging it, and they're liking the whole theme, not just the music. So hopefully through touring with Dragonforce, there'll be a few more fans won over as well.
On this album that you released, this is not just a straight, quote unquote, just a straightforward power metal album. There's a lot going on. There's different styles of music. It allows you to, if there is a volume 2, it allows you to explore it in so many different directions. If you're now already thinking like, oh, people seem to like it, people seem to get it, I'd like to do more of this. When you're thinking about next steps, should we then think that you're building off of a natural evolution of what happened? Or would it be like, okay, I've done that, and now I would like to try to make a, Green Slate Inspire album, which is completely different, but still as a solo project? Like, what's the thought process there?
Well, and
obviously, whatever you say, everybody's now going to expect from you. So
yeah. So choose the words carefully. No, actually, with Starbound Stories, we actually had another 5 songs that we couldn't fit on the album. So I already have a good starting point there, which, as you can imagine, means that they're in a similar vein to the ones on the album. Right. And they weren't not picked because they were worse. They were not picked because some of them were too long, and I had to make the album flow nicely from start to finish. Right. So, but no, it's just I've been thinking about more like when I'm actually listening to music that I enjoy. Just thinking of incorporating a couple of elements from those things that I kind of didn't really on this. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I still do want to make music that is power metal at its core, but influenced by Japanese music. So, having lots of different chord progressions not used in Western music. And then also have a bunch more themes I want to talk about. So it will be an evolution of this album, but it took making this album to realize like where we can go next. So it's like a learning experience, but I think now I know like what worked and what didn't. So
well, I mean, Mark, it's great to see the energy that you seem to have gotten from this from this whole adventure, if you will, and clearly the inspiration that is there. And I have a sneaking suspicion it's not going to take too long before we see new material released into the wild. First up, obviously, to kind of wrap us up, the immediate focus is obviously on Dragonforce, new album coming, tour also coming to North America. It's going to be crazy package. I think you guys are bringing Nano War of Steel as well along. You will play Toronto here in a few months from now. Apart from a lot of energy and craziness, what can we expect?
Well, I mean, I don't think I'm allowed to say a whole lot about what's going to happen next, unfortunately, but I'm sure you probably guessed that as well. But what I will say is that the next set of shows are going to be fairly different to what people have seen before.
Right.
Lots of new, cool stuff. But I think my hands are tied as to being able to say anything about what they are.
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, we'll all come to the show. I will see you when you play Toronto, and then we get to see with our own eyes. Marc, I know this is extremely busy days, and I know also what people don't always realize, that you go through a lot of effort to get to talk to as many people as you can, and being super flexible, and that's very, very appreciated. So thank you so much for taking the time, and I wish you not only a fantastic continued release cycle of your solo album, but a great start of the tour and all the goodness that is coming our way very soon. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it too. Thank you for the interesting questions. And yeah, it's been my pleasure.
You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it and subscribe to the channel.